From all over our region, this is Kaleidoscope. For years, capturing the good news, interesting places, and remarkable people doing their best. This is Kaleidoscope, presented by the Pennsylvania Great Outdoors Visitors Bureau.
Hello and welcome to Kaleidoscope. I'm Sarah Cameron. Coming up, we take you into Forest County, the history dating back thousands of years, life in Pennsylvania as it used to be, how one family even makes Forest County unique for residents now. Plus, forget about eBay, the original way of auctions is still alive and well. A conversation with auctioneer Dale Mishler. But first, we head north to the Forest County Historical Society located in Tionesta. It's based in the former home of George and Martha Robinson. The Historical Society has a wide selection of original items from the 1800s and even dating back several thousand years. Timber was a big deal in Forest County, so one popular display is a replica of a lumber camp. Check it out.
The Historical Society started back in 1977, and we have a role of preserving and protecting the memorabilia from Forest County. We have as recently set education as one of our main goals for our items that we have here. So we try to educate the public about Forest County through the memorabilia that is left by. We're sitting in the home of George and Martha Robinson, who had the house built in the 1870s. They used a lot of lumber from the area to have this house built. George fought in the Civil War, and then he came to Tionesta with his wife. He had a little mercantile that he ran, a little general store, just 2 buildings down from this place, and he made his money in that and a number of other jobs that he did. He worked for the bank as well, and so he had a variety of jobs, and he was quite well-to-do for the time. George Robinson was an avid collector of Indian arrowheads, and so we have a display of Indian arrowheads from the Tionesta area that he collected, and then we had students from Mercyhurst College that carbon dated all of those, and so we have the dates that they were actually come from, and many of them are a couple thousand years BC. We have a bedroom that is our only, so to say, to period room, by which I mean we tried to make it like a bedroom of the 1870s. 3 of the pieces in that bedroom are actually from this house originally, and other things have been added. One of the most unique things about that people always seem to notice is that we have a human hair wreath, because women would take their hair and save it when it would come out, and then they would sit and spin it into little flowers, and so they would make this human hair wreath. And it was a mourning wreath, so whenever somebody in the family died, they would give that wreath to that family for a certain period of time to hang within their home and mourn their loved ones. Well, we have a room that we call the Dr. Forrest Bavard room, and Dr. Bavard worked from 1899 until 1949. He was a local doctor. He did house calls and everything, and then after he passed away, his wife gave us everything that was in his office at the time. So we have a display of all kinds of medical things from that time period. Our local AMVETS club curates our veterans room. One of the neatest things that I think is in the veterans room is an old Civil War desk. It was a field desk where they would set up the desk and look up records, and then they would have to take it down and move on in battle. So it's very portable. We have our what we call our nursery room. Put in there many old toys, collectible toys, and antique items that a child would use. One of the highlights of the basement would be the old Forrest Press printing press. In the old days, they actually used an actual press where they had to line up all the little stamps backwards and then roll the ink on it and then put it under the press, pull the press, and that would make one page. Forest County, being named for the forest, obviously had a lot of lumber. Going down the Tionesta Creek to the Allegheny River was a great passageway to get to Pittsburgh. For those reasons, we harvested the forest and had a place to send them to have them processed. And so lumber was king in Forest County. Many times there were lumber camps, and what we have here is a replica of a lumber camp. All lumber camps had a source of heat. They kept the fires burning, so to say. If you were the older guy with the most experience, you got to sleep closer to the source of heat. Well, if you were the new guy on the block, you had to sleep way down at the other end of the camp. Oftentimes the lumber camp had women who actually stayed at the lumber camp and made the food and everything for the men. Many people would choose which lumber camp they would go to based on who had the best cook. Because of course, you know, that always got out, word got out who had a good cook. People would go out and cut down the trees, and they were called woodhicks in Pennsylvania. We really didn't have lumberjacks, we had woodhicks. And these woodhicks would cut down the trees, and then they would get them down to the Tionesta Creek, and then in the spring, when the creek would rise, it would just pick up the logs and take them to the Allegheny River. From the Allegheny River, they would float down to Pittsburgh, where it was the main processing. So we would always need a way to mark which lumber was ours. And so every company would have a lumber stamp, and they would take that lumber stamp and pound it into the end of the tree. So when you get down to like a processing place in Pittsburgh, they would separate everything. Now, of course, the first people to get there would be the first people to make their money. We had river pilots, and these river pilots would build rafts, and they would go down with the lumber, and they would try to get their lumber in front of everybody else's lumber. And so there were many jostling and fighting and things like that would happen along that time. But once they would get down to Pittsburgh, then it would be the first come, first serve, basically, that would happen. And then oftentimes these bargemen would take apart the barge, and they would have to walk back to Forest County. They say if you don't know the past, then you're doomed to repeat the past. And so for that reason, I think it's good. We have such a rich history here, and honestly, I think most people don't know much about where they came from. So it makes it a little hard to know where you're going to. And I personally did not get interested in history per se or this particular house until after I retired. It's just something that grew on me, but I do think it's very important that our kids know more about their local history and where they came from.
A unique tidbit of history about Forest County is coming up later in the show, but for now, we'll be right back. That unique tidbit of history we told you about earlier, Forest County was not always a county in Pennsylvania. Mary Alice will explain.
If you go back far enough and look at a map of Pennsylvania, you'll see there is no Forest County. Cyrus Blood, he always wanted to found a county, so he looked at Jefferson County, and it was all wilderness up in northern Jefferson County. So Cyrus petitioned the state of Pennsylvania and for Jefferson County, and he asked if he could have a piece of Jefferson County. And so they were able to carve out a piece of Jefferson County to become Forest County. So Cyrus Blood set up Marionville, named after his daughter Marion. Years pass, and Tionesta has always been on the map, but some political prominent people start to be in Tionesta, and they petitioned the state of Pennsylvania, and they said, well, could we take a part of Venango County and expand Forest County? They carved a piece of Venango County and added it. At this time, Tionesta had the larger population, and so Tionesta said, well, we would like to be the county seat. And the legislation of Pennsylvania said, yes, you can be the county seat because you have the larger population, and therefore the courthouse can be built in Tionesta. And so sometimes people in Marionville get mad because we stole the courthouse from them.
Hopefully they don't steal it back. And that does it for this episode of Kaleidoscope. To learn more about Kaleidoscope, check us out online or like our Facebook page. And as I always say, for a different view of our region, look at life through our kaleidoscope. We'll see you next weekend, everyone.